wire fences installed around the Capitol today, trying to ensure a peaceful transfer of power. Capitol Police out with a new statement saying the grounds will be closed to the public for next week's inauguration. Presidential petulance turning Washington, D.C. into what looks like a war zone. Tens of thousands of troops standing guard for democracy. President Trump's next move after getting impeached, when his Senate trial will happen, and what the top Republican on the Hill, Mitch McConnell, is saying or not saying about how he will vote. Trump mob roundup, several involved in the Capitol Hill violence now facing justice, including, authorities say, the man seen stalking the halls with the Confederate flag, and a retired firefighter caught on video throwing an extinguisher at a line of overwhelmed police as a group of Democrats demand a probe into the nature of the Capitol tours given the day before the attack, alleging suspicious behavior and access. The list of banned passengers grows in the wake of those Capitol Hill riots. Videos now emerge of unruly Trump supporters flying to and from D.C. last week.
If we don't stand up, it's only going to get worse.
What the head of the FAA tells us about its zero-tolerance policy. The race to vaccinate more Americans as demand soars. More than half of the millions of doses already distributed yet to reach the public. Mega vaccination sites opening from coast to coast. And the dire images from L.A. Body bags lined up as one person dies from COVID every 6 minutes there. Good evening, everyone. I'm Lindsay Davis. Thanks so much for streaming with us. In his farewell address, when deciding to only serve 2 terms as president, George Washington warned of the dangers of extreme partisanship, saying that animosity leads to, quote, riot and insurrection. The entire speech from 1796 is read by a lawmaker from a different party every year on the Senate floor, a tradition that began during the darkest days of the Civil War. Tonight, under Washington's watchful gaze, National Guard members are quarantined in the U.S. Capitol for the first time since the Civil War. And there's now renewed concern about the potential for dark days ahead. A sobering new memo from the FBI tonight warns that right-wing extremists and domestic terrorists are likely to use violence in the coming days. And on Capitol Hill, some of the Republicans who voted for impeachment are now concerned for their safety. One saying, "Our expectation is that someone may try to kill us." Our Chief Justice correspondent Pierre Thomas starts us off with the unprecedented effort to keep Americans safe.
Tonight, a new intelligence assessment raising the specter of continued insurrection next week. The new FBI bulletin urges authorities in D.C. and all 50 state capitals to prepare for a fight or face the prospect that violent offenders could, quote, overwhelm local, state, and federal law enforcement. 6 days until the inauguration, and with an expected 21,000 National Guard available, there are now more troops in Washington, D.C. than U.S. military in Afghanistan and Iraq combined. Razor wire, blocked streets, a city fortifying itself. Officials shutting down the entire Capitol complex and floating the possibility of keeping everyone off the National Mall.
The National Mall normally would be filled with hundreds of thousands of people who come to watch the inauguration. Shutting it down would be unprecedented, but it shows you just how concerned officials are.
All this because the FBI believes that last week's assault emboldened right-wing radicals to return and pursue more violence.
Anybody who plots or attempts violence in the coming week should count on a visit.
Sources telling ABC News different groups from around the country appear to be coordinating. Overnight, FBI Director Wray briefing chiefs in major cities, telling them to be on the lookout for potential lone wolf actors that could blend in with more peaceful protesters.
When you have people come down to peacefully protest and get a large crowd and some bad actors infiltrate that can turn a peaceful crowd into what we've seen in the past.
At the same time, they're pursuing rioters by the dozen. Suspects like Kevin Seafried. Authorities say he's seen here carrying the Confederate flag. Arrested in Delaware this morning along with his son. Robert Sanford, allegedly the man seen here hitting several police in the head with a fire extinguisher. He's a retired firefighter from Pennsylvania, turned in by a longtime friend who recognized him in the FBI photos. Christine Priola, a former occupational therapist for Cleveland schools, allegedly seen here in the Senate chamber. And Jenny Cudd, in a since-deleted Facebook video posted after the riot. Authorities say she admitted to breaking into the Capitol.
We did break down
the Nancy Pelosi's office door.
And tonight, more than 30 members of Congress are calling for an investigation, calling it suspicious that an extremely high number of outside groups in the complex on January 5th, the day before the riots, which is unusual given that public tours of the Capitol ended in March 2020 due to the coronavirus pandemic, and claiming that some of the visitors appear to be associated with the rally that preceded the riot.
Certainly great interest in the outcome of that investigation. Pierre Thomas joins us now. And Pierre, so much happening on the ground in Washington to make sure that the city is kept secure. But will the plans for the inauguration have to be scaled back because of the security threats?
Lindsay, they're really trying to hold the inauguration outside as is tradition. But Lindsay, the threat situation is so intense right now, so intense that Biden does not plan to take his beloved Amtrak train to the inauguration.
And law enforcement seems to be working quickly to identify and arrest those responsible for the attack. Just give us a sense of the scope of the operation that's now underway across the country.
Extraordinary. The FBI has identified 200 suspects tied to that mob assault. That's an incredible number. And Lindsay, that number could rise.
Pierre Thomas, thanks so much. All of this comes as President Trump has not taken direct responsibility for any role in inciting the rioters that stormed the Capitol last week. And tonight, members of his own staff have started moving out of the White House. As our Jonathan Karl reports, the president's fate after he leaves office now rests in the hands of the Senate.
Yes, sir. Very good.
Tonight, Vice President Mike Pence made a surprise visit to Capitol Hill, thanking the National Guard troops who will be protecting the inauguration.
Have a safe inauguration, and I just wanted to stop out today to say thank you.
Spotted at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, moving trucks. Donald Trump's aides seen packing up and moving on. One person carrying a bust out of the West Wing. As House Republicans who broke ranks and voted to impeach the president are facing the fury of Trump loyalists. Congressman Peter Meijer of Michigan, the only freshman Republican who voted to impeach, says some of his colleagues fear for their lives and are traveling with armed escorts.
Many of us are altering our routines, working to get body armor. It's sad that we have to get to that point, but our expectation is that someone may try to kill us.
Liz Cheney, the most prominent Republican yes vote on impeachment, is fighting for her political life. She said of Trump, there has never been a greater betrayal by a president of the United States. Today, Congressman Jim Jordan and other die-hard Trump supporters circulated a petition calling for her to be booted out of her leadership position, saying that she, quote, brought the conference into disrepute and produced discord. But a spokesperson for Kevin McCarthy said the Republican House leader opposes the move to remove Cheney. McCarthy, who has been one of Trump's most loyal supporters, opposed impeachment, but also placed blame on Trump for the Capitol riot.
These facts require immediate action by President Trump. Accept his share of responsibility, quell the brewing unrest, and ensure President-elect Biden is able to successfully begin his term.
Late last night, a full week after the riot, Trump released a video telling his supporters to be calm and nonviolent.
Mob violence goes against everything I believe in and everything our movement stands for.
This after he riled them up just before the riot began.
We fight like hell, and if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore.
He still hasn't taken any responsibility whatsoever for inciting the violence, insisting his words were totally appropriate. Now it's up to the Senate to judge whether that's true. The trial will likely begin just after the inauguration. It will take 17 Republicans and all of the Democrats to convict. Senator Lisa Murkowski says the president deserved to be impeached.
I believe that this president has committed an impeachable offense.
Still, Murkowski has not said whether she'll vote to convict, but she did declare that Trump's unlawful actions cannot go without consequence.
It's still unclear just what those consequences will be. Jonathan Karl joins us now from Washington. John, as you mentioned, at least 17 Republican senators must vote to impeach for a conviction. I imagine many Republican senators on the fence will be closely watching what Mitch McConnell decides to do.
Yeah, and it's really anybody's guess how McConnell will vote on conviction. All he has said to his colleagues is that he has not made up his mind on this. I think that if McConnell ultimately decides to vote for conviction, there is a very good chance that there would be 67 votes, 17 of them Republicans, to actually convict. Without McConnell, it's hard to see how it happens. But McConnell is sending an unmistakable message here, Lindsay, to Republicans and, more importantly, perhaps, to the president, that he is not going to bail Donald Trump out this time. He may or may not vote to convict, but he is certainly not going to defend him.
And, John, as you said, the president's team is beginning to leave the White House. We're learning tonight that the federal government is sparing no expense to clean and disinfect the building before President-elect Biden moves in.
Yeah, they're going to do a deep clean, and it's an expensive deep clean. We have learned that the government has contracted some $200,000 worth of extra cleaning to happen around the inauguration. This includes, I've got some numbers here for you, if you can imagine, $44,000 on inaugural carpet cleaning and $29,000 for inaugural curtains cleaning, and a lot else. It will be a very vigorous clean of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue before Biden moves in.
$200,000 cleaning bill. All right, Jonathan
Yes.
Karl, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Joining us now is the man who will take VP-elect Kamala Harris's Senate seat and become the first Latino from the state of California to serve in the U.S. Senate. California Secretary of State Alex Padilla, thank you so much for your time tonight. We appreciate it.
No, thank you for having me. It's been a busy week, a lot to prepare for, but we're excited to get to work.
A busy week, no doubt. Now, you will be officially sworn into the Senate next week, another busy week, and immediately face two consequential votes. How should the Senate balance an unheard-of impeachment trial of a former president, along with the urgent need for COVID relief and addressing all aspects of how the pandemic is being handled?
Look, the intensity of the workload that awaits is not lost on me, but I think in conversation with every one of my colleagues we know we have to be able to walk and chew gum at the same time. It's not a matter of either or. COVID response is absolutely important. Holding President Trump accountable is extremely important. And doing our part as the Biden-Harris administration settles in is also extremely important. So we're prepared to do what it takes.
Any sense at all from some of your soon-to-be colleagues as far as what the Senate might do?
No, everything will run its proper course, but I can tell you after not just a couple of weeks that we've been through, not just the last 12 months that we've been through, but the last 4 years that we've been through a reoriented and hopefully rebalanced leadership, both in the White House and in Congress, especially on the Senate side, gives us a tremendous opportunity to do and act aggressively in a way that we haven't been able to in recent years.
Now, many fear that last week's domestic terror attack may only embolden attackers. A Republican in the House who voted for impeachment said today that our expectation is someone may try to kill us. Do you have concerns about your personal safety coming into such a high-profile role?
Look, again, the threats that have come to light are not lost on me, but we do have faith and confidence in the incoming Biden administration, their leadership, but the professional departments and agencies to keep not just the members of Congress safe, but the Capitol community and the general Washington, D.C. area. Sometimes a delicate balance between those who want to raise their voice and protest as allowed in the First Amendment, but the violence and the true insurrection is what we saw last week is clearly beyond just that. Frankly, when I saw the images last Wednesday, it only emboldened my resolve to want to get to work and get to work quickly.
Now, the home state papers of both Senators Josh Hawley as well as Ted Cruz have called for them both to resign for their role in attempting to overturn the results of the election. Assuming they don't step down, do you think that their actions warrant any kind of response?
Most definitely. Let's put the responsibility where it lies, beginning with Donald Trump. If the trail of information, which is already there and public, leads to Senators Hawley and Senators Cruz, there have to be consequence. There has to be accountability. Nobody is above the law. And so if they choose to remain in office, contrary to their home state papers, what they've called for, then there's got to be other ways for the institution to hold them accountable.
Now, as you well know, California is home to 2 million undocumented workers, many of whom have kept right on working on their farms and in essential jobs despite COVID fears. Now, you've called for a pathway for citizenship in the next COVID relief bill. Are you concerned at all that that might complicate the process of getting relief to Americans who desperately need it?
I'm not worried at all. You know, my job is to raise the voice on what's best for California, consistent with not just my values, but the values, I think, of our nation. You know, we call these workers essential for a reason, and if they're in an important enough role to be deemed essential workers, then we have to treat them as such. And yes, that includes COVID protections, that includes basic worker and labor protections. But for folks who have been here for years and years and years, paying taxes, raising families, contributing to the success of our nation and our economy, they deserve that stability, security, and a pathway to citizenship.
And lastly, California is 40% Latino, and as I mentioned at the beginning, you will be the first Latino from your state to serve in the Senate. Here's the moment where you found out from Governor Newsom that he was offering you the post. Let's take a look.
Can you imagine what Mom would be thinking now as I ask you if you want to be the next U.S. Senator of the United States, the great state of California?
You serious?
This is the official, this is the ask, brother.
I'm honored, man, and I'm humbled.
On a personal level, as the son of immigrants, kind of give us a sense of what you were thinking in that moment, as well as what you were thinking as you saw a mob of domestic terrorists attacking the Capitol last weekend, and what gives you hope tonight?
Yeah, look, in that video, what you see is what you get. It was the call I was hoping for from the governor, and even with that anticipation, couldn't help but immediately my thoughts and emotions came to my parents and recognizing their journey, their struggle, their sacrifice in pursuit of the American dream. They raised 3 children, were all public servants in different capacities, and to think that in one generation, my family has gone from those immigrants, my father working as a cook, my mom cleaning houses for a living, to me serving in the United States Senate, it means the American dream is still alive. And that's what fueled my public service, making sure that the American dream remains alive for future generations. But the visuals we saw last Wednesday, as horrific as they were, I think for me what's equally horrific is that they didn't come as a surprise. The American dream has been under attack throughout the Trump administration and beyond. And it's just a reminder that we have a lot of work to do, not just to restore, decency and civility and civic discourse, but to make the American dream more available and accessible to so many working families across the country that absolutely deserve it.
Senator-designate Alex Padilla, we thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you coming on the show.
Thank you, Lindsay. Hope to be back soon.
And now we want to bring you a live picture from Wilmington, Delaware, where in a few minutes, President-elect Biden is expected to outline what his team is calling an economic rescue legislative package and vaccination rollout plan. This as hospitals continue to be overwhelmed with patients while states sound the alarm about not meeting vaccine demand. ABC's Matt Gutman brings us this report.
Tonight, one person dying every 6 minutes in L.A. County, and the grim work of managing that toll falls to the L.A. Coroner's Office. Teams including National Guards laying out those body bags in the parking lot and moving the bodies into those refrigerated containers. Nearly 4,000 American lives reported lost to the virus in 24 hours. Making the race to vaccinate even more urgent. From California to New York, mass vaccination sites struggling to meet soaring demand. In Long Island, 88-year-old Charlotte McKenna in line for a shot.
I'm very grateful.
But no luck for her 65-year-old daughter, who just became eligible.
Once it went to 65, that was the end. There was not 1 ounce of availability on any site.
This location booked through April. The state now gets about 300,000 doses each week. But at that rate, it would take 6 months to reach the 7 million New Yorkers now eligible to get that first shot. And across the country, confusion. Phone lines jammed, websites crashing.
It has been really frustrating because there's nowhere to turn. There's no options, no matter how smart you are.
Hospitals just as swamped as vaccination sites.
Antelope Valley Hospital.
That has ravaged our nation tragically claimed its first life. On February the 6th in 2020, Patricia Dowd took her last breath at home under the California sun in Santa Clara. She was 57 years old, a beloved wife, mother, daughter, and sister. She never knew she had the virus at the time when most folks never heard about the virus. But just like that, she was gone. And almost exactly 1 year later, nearly 400,000 of our fellow Americans have met the same cruel fate. Countless families and friends left behind with unrelenting grief and guilt, anger and frustration. And the emptiness felt by the loss of life is compounded by the loss of our way of life. During this pandemic, millions of Americans, through no fault of their own, have lost the dignity and respect that comes with a job and a paycheck. Millions of Americans never thought they'd be out of work. Many of them never even envisioned the idea, are facing eviction, waiting for hours in their cars to feed their families as they drive up to a food bank. Millions have kept their jobs but have seen their hours and paychecks reduced, barely hanging on as well. That's happening today in the United States of America. Just as in the midst of the dark winter of this pandemic, as cases, hospitalizations, and deaths spike at record levels, there is real pain overwhelming the real economy. One where people rely on paychecks, not their investments, to pay for their bills and their meals and their children's needs. You won't see this pain if your scorecard is how things are going on Wall Street. But you will see it very clearly if you examine what the twin crises of a pandemic and this sinking economy have laid bare. The growing divide between those few people at the very top who are doing quite well in this economy and the rest of America. Just since this pandemic began, the wealth of the top 1% of the nation has grown roughly $1.5 trillion since the end of last year, 4 times the amount for the entire bottom 50% of American wage earners. Some 18 million Americans are still relying on unemployment insurance. Some 400,000 small businesses have permanently closed their doors. And it's not hard to see that we're in the middle of the once-in-several-generations economic crisis with a once-in-several-generations public health crisis. The crisis of deep human suffering is in plain sight, and there's no time to waste. We have to act, and we have to act now. This is what economists are telling us. More importantly, it's what the values we hold dear in our hearts as Americans are telling us. A growing chorus of top economists agree that the moment of crisis, in this moment of crisis, with interest rates at historic lows, we cannot afford inaction. It's not just that smart fiscal investments, including deficit spending, are more urgent than ever. It's that the return on these investments in jobs, racial equity, will prevent long-term economic damage, and the benefits will far surpass the cost. A growing number of top economists has shown even our debt situation will be more stable, not less stable, if we seize this moment with vision and purpose. And so tonight, I'd like to talk to you about our way forward, a 2-step plan of rescue and recovery, a 2-step plan to build a bridge to the other side of the crisis we face to a better, stronger, more secure America. Tonight, I'll lay out my first step, the American Rescue Plan, that will tackle the pandemic and get direct financial assistance and relief to Americans who need it the most. Next month, in my first appearance before a joint session of Congress, I will lay out my Build Back Better recovery plan. It'll make historic investments in infrastructure, that Build Back Better plan. Infrastructure, manufacturing, innovation, research and development, and clean energy. Investments in a caregiving economy and in skills and training needed by our workers to be able to compete and win in the global economy of the coming years. Moody's, an independent Wall Street firm, said my approach will create more than 18 million good-paying jobs. Our rescue and recovery plan is a path forward with both seriousness of purpose and a clear plan, with transparency and accountability, with a call for unity that is equally necessary. And unity is not some pie-in-the-sky dream. It's a practical step to getting the things we have to get done as a country get done together. As I said when it passed in December, the bipartisan COVID-19 relief package was a very important first step. And I'm grateful for the Democrats, Republicans, and independent members of Congress who came together to get it done. But I said at the time, it's just a down payment. We need more action, more bipartisanship, and we need to move quickly. We need to move fast. Our rescue plan starts aggressively in order to speed up our national COVID-19 response. The vaccines offer so much hope, and we're grateful to the scientists and researchers and everyone who participated in the clinical trials. We're also grateful for the rigorous review and testing that has led to millions of people around the world already being vaccinated safely. But the vaccine rollout in the United States has been a dismal failure thus far. Tomorrow, I will lay out our vaccination plan to correct course and meet our goal of 100 million shots at the end of my first 100 days as president. This will be one of the most challenging operational efforts we have ever undertaken as a nation. We'll have to move heaven and earth to get more people vaccinated, to create more places for them to get vaccinated, to mobilize more medical teams to get shots in people's arms, to increase vaccine supply, and to get it out the door as fast as possible. We'll also do everything we can to keep our educators and students safe, to safely reopen a majority of our K-8 schools by the end of the first 100 days. We can do this if we give the school districts, the schools themselves, the communities, the states, the clear guidance they need, as well as the resources they need that they can't afford right now because of the economic dilemma they're in. That means more testing and transportation, additional cleaning and sanitizing services in those schools, protective equipment and ventilation systems in those schools. We need to make sure that workers who have COVID-19 symptoms are quarantined, and those who need to take care of their family members with COVID-19 symptoms should be able to stay home from work and still get paid. This will reduce the spread of the virus and make sure workers get the support they need to maintain their families. But we need about $400 billion in funding from Congress to make all of what I just said happen. It's a great deal, but I'm convinced we are ready to get this done. The very health of our nation is at stake. Our rescue plan also includes immediate relief to Americans hardest hit and most in need. We will finish the job of getting a total of $2,000 in cash relief to people who need it the most. The $600 already appropriated is simply not enough. You just have to choose between paying rent and putting food on the table. Even for those who've kept their jobs, these checks are really important. You see, if you're an American worker making $40,000 a year with less than $400 in savings, maybe you've lost hours, or maybe you're doing fewer shifts, driving a truck or caring for the kids or the elderly. You're out there putting your life on the line to work during this pandemic and worried every week that you'll get sick, lose your job, or worse. $2,000 is going to go a long way to ease that pain. We'll also provide more peace of mind for struggling families by extending unemployment insurance beyond the end of March for millions of workers. That means that 18 million Americans currently relying on unemployment benefits while they look for work can count on these checks continuing to be there. Plus, there will be a $400 per week supplement so people can make ends meet. This gets money quickly into the pockets of millions of Americans who will spend it immediately on food and rent and other basic needs. As the economists tell us, that helps the whole economy grow. We'll also tackle the growing hunger crisis in America. As I speak, and the Vice President-elect has spoken to this many times, 1 in 7 households in America, more than 1 in 5 Black and Latino households in America, report they don't have enough food to eat. This includes 30 million adults and as many as 12 million children. It's wrong. It's tragic. It's unnecessary. It's unacceptable. So we're going to extend emergency nutritional assistance for 43 million children and their families enrolled in the SNAP program through the rest of this year. We'll help hard-hit restaurants prepare meals for the hungry, provide food for the families who need it. We will invest $3 billion in making sure mothers and their young children have the nutrition they need. This will not only meet our moral obligation we have to one another, but will also spur our economic growth, get restaurants and workers back on the job. And as we work to keep people from going hungry, we'll also work to keep a roof over their heads, to stem the growing housing crisis and evictions that are looming. Approximately 14 million Americans have fallen behind on rent, many at risk of eviction. If we don't act now, there'll be a wave of evictions and foreclosures in the coming months as the pandemic rages on. This would overwhelm emergency shelters, increase COVID-19 infections as people have nowhere to go and can't socially distance. Next week, we'll take action to extend nationwide restrictions on evictions and foreclosures. This will provide more than 25 million Americans greater stability instead of living on the edge every single month. And I'm asking Congress to do its part by funding rental assistance for 14 million hard-hit families and tenants. It will also be a bridge to economic recovery for countless mom-and-pop landlords. These crises are straining the budgets of states and cities and tribal communities that are forced to consider layoff and service restrictions of the most needed workers. It means that people putting their lives at risk are the very people now at risk of losing their jobs. Police officers, firefighters, all first responders, nurses, educators. You know, over the last year alone, over 600,000 educators have lost their jobs in our cities and towns. Our rescue plan will provide emergency funding to keep these essential workers on the job and maintain essential services. It will ensure that vaccines are administered and schools can reopen. Vice President-elect Harris and I have been speaking with county officials, mayors, governors of both parties on a regular basis. We're ready to work with them, to help them get the relief they need. Our rescue plan will also help small businesses that are the engines of our economic growth, our economy as a whole, the glue that holds communities together as well. But they're hurting badly. And you realize they account for nearly half of the entire total U.S. workforce. Our rescue plan will provide flexible grants to help those hardest hit small businesses survive the pandemic, and the low-cost capital that will help entrepreneurs of all backgrounds create and maintain jobs, plus provide the essential goods and services that communities depend upon. Last week, I laid out how we'll make sure that our emergency small business relief is distributed swiftly and equitably, unlike the first time around. We're going to focus on small businesses on Main Street. We'll focus on minority-owned small businesses, women-owned small businesses, and finally having equal access to the resources they need to reopen and to rebuild. And we will be responsible with taxpayers' dollars, ensuring accountability that reduces waste and fraud and abuse like we did in the Recovery Act that I administered in our administration. Direct cash payments, extended unemployment insurance, rent relief, food assistance, keeping essential frontline workers on the job, aid to small businesses. These are the key elements to the American Rescue Plan that would lift 12 million Americans out of poverty and cut child poverty in half. That's 5 million children lifted out of poverty if we move. Our plan will reduce poverty in the Black community by 1/3, reduce poverty in the Hispanic community by almost 40%, and includes much more, like an increase in the minimum wage to at least $15 an hour. People tell me that's going to be hard to pass. Florida just passed it. As divided as that state is, they just passed it. The rest of the country is ready to move as well. It should be a national minimum wage of $15 an hour. No one working 40 hours a week should live below the poverty line. And that's what it means. If you work for less than $15 an hour and work 40 hours a week, you're living in poverty. It includes access to affordable child care that will enable parents, particularly women, to get back to work. I look forward to working with members of Congress of both parties to move quickly to get the American Rescue Plan to the American people. And then we can move with equal urgency and bipartisanship to my Build Back Better recovery plan that I will call for next month to generate even more economic growth. American manufacturing was the arsenal of democracy in World War II. It will be so again. Imagine a future made in America, all made in America, and all by Americans. We'll use taxpayers' dollars to rebuild America. We'll buy American products, supporting millions of American manufacturing jobs, enhancing our competitive strength in an increasingly competitive world. Imagine historic investments in research and development to sharpen America's innovative edge in markets where global leadership is up for grabs. Markets like the battery technology, artificial intelligence, biotechnology, clean energy. Imagine confronting the climate crisis with American jobs and ingenuity leading the world. It's time to stop talking about infrastructure and to finally start building an infrastructure so we can be more competitive. Millions of good-paying jobs that put Americans to work rebuilding our roads, our bridges, our ports, to make them more climate resilient, to make them faster, cheaper, cleaner, to transport American-made goods across our country and around the world. That's how we compete. And imagine millions of jobs in a caregiving economy to ease the financial burden of caring for young children and aged loved ones. Let's make sure our caregivers, mostly women, women of color, immigrants, have the same pay and dignity that they deserve. So we can do these bold, practical things now. You know, I know what I just described does not come cheaply, but failure to do so will cost us dearly. The consensus among leading economists is we simply cannot afford not to do what I'm proposing. Independent, respected institutions from around the world, from the Federal Reserve to the International Monetary Fund, have underscored the urgency. Even Wall Street firms have reinforced the logic. If we invest now boldly, smartly, and with unwavering focus on American workers and families, we will strengthen our economy, reduce inequity, and put our nation's long-term finances on the most sustainable course. And where we're making permanent investments, recurring investments, as I said in the campaign trail, we will pay for that by making sure that everyone pays their fair share, not punishing anybody. We can do it without punishing a single person by closing tax loopholes for companies that ship jobs overseas, or they'll allow American companies, 90 of them, the top Fortune 500, to pay zero in federal income taxes, asking everyone to pay their fair share at the top so we can make permanent investments to rescue and rebuild America. It's the right thing for our economy. It's the fair thing. It's the decent thing to do. We not only have an economic imperative to act now, I believe we have a moral obligation. In this pandemic, in America, we cannot let people go hungry. We cannot let people get evicted. We cannot watch nurses, educators, and others lose their jobs. We so badly need them. We must act now and act decisively. My fellow Americans, the decisions we make in the next few weeks and months are going to determine whether we thrive in a way that benefits all Americans, or that we stay stuck in a place where those at the top do great, while economic growth for most everyone else is just a spectator sport, and where American prospects dim, not brighten. These investments will determine whether we reassert American leadership and outcompete our competitors in a global economy. We're better equipped to do this than any nation in the world. Or that we watch them catch up and pass us by. Together, I know which path we'll choose. And that includes all Americans, so we can own the 21st century. But even with all of these bold steps, it's going to take time to get where we need to be. There will be stumbles, but I will always be honest with you about both the progress we're making and what setbacks we meet. And there will, and here's the deal, the more people we vaccinate, the faster we do it, the sooner we can save lives and put this pandemic behind us and get back to our lives and our loved ones. And the sooner we can rescue and rebuild the American economy, the biggest and most profitable engine in the world. I know it's been nearly a year that tested us beyond measure. For all of you who have lost someone, my heart goes out to you. I know that feeling looking at that empty chair across the table. All of you who've fallen on hard times, I know you can never get back what you lost. But as your president, I know that every day matters and every person matters. From the very first to the nearly 400,000 lost American souls and counting, to the millions of you just looking for a fighting chance in this economy, I promise you, we will not forget you. We understand what you're going through. We will never, ever give up. And we will come back. We'll come back together. Well, we didn't get into all this overnight. We won't get out of it overnight. And we can't do it as a separated and divided nation. The only way we can do it is to come together as fellow Americans, as neighbors, as the United States of America. And when we do, there's nothing beyond our capacity. I've said this many times. When America acts as one, there's never been a single thing we've been unable to do, no matter how consequential the issue has been. Out of all the peril of this moment, I want you to know, I give you a word, I see the promise as well. We've seen clearly what we face now. And I remain so optimistic about America. As optimistic as I've ever been. We have everything we need, but the will must be demonstrated. So come Wednesday, we begin a new chapter. The Vice President-elect and I will do our best to meet all the expectations you have for the country and the expectations we have for it. I'm confident. I am truly confident. Together, we can get this done and come out better off than when we went into this crisis. God bless you all, and may God protect our troops.
And now let's bring in ABC News political director Rick Klein. Certainly an ambitious plan that was just outlined there by President-elect Biden. He said it will not come cheaply, but we cannot afford not to do it. What stood out to you, Rick, and how realistic is it for this proposal to move forward in the new Congress?
This is a staggering array of program changes, subsidies, legal changes, longtime priorities of progressives, many of them tailored and enhanced for the COVID age. The price tag of some $2 trillion, of course, stands out, given the divided politics that we're in. But the calculation here from President-elect Biden is that he needs to go big to try to establish very early on in this presidency that there is a Biden coalition and that it can rally, in his words, with some unity around the magnitude of the challenge. Very critical of the way that COVID-19 vaccine has been rolled out, trying to marshal some degree of unity in a time where people are just so divided. You can't imagine a more divisive atmosphere in the country and in the Congress than the one that is confronting Joe Biden. Yes, the Democrats control Congress, but they are very, very narrow majorities, and it is going to take everything that Joe Biden can muster to try to get packages like this through the House and especially the Senate.
And this plan comes under the specter of a looming impeachment trial in the Senate in the first days of the Biden administration. How much could that complicate the legislative calendar and for getting bipartisan support for this plan?
Yeah, think about it, Lindsay. The opening days of the Biden presidency are going to be consumed with an impeachment trial. We are going to see that in the Senate. The Senate's going to have to focus at least some of its time on that, as opposed to confirming appointments and, of course, considering this proposal. And we have this atmosphere of tension on Capitol Hill, as we've reported. Members of Congress are, some of them, fearful that other members of Congress may be out to harm them. Those are very serious allegations. No one can even guarantee, really, the safety of the inauguration itself. But you hear from President-elect Biden his desire to address a joint session of Congress next month. That's the first time he's outlined that plan to talk about what he calls his Build Back Better program. And again, try to get some political momentum early on to try to cut through where this is. And I'll tell you this, the Biden team has long said that whatever the noise of Donald Trump, and there's been a lot of it, especially lately, the American people recognize what the challenge that Joe Biden confronts really means. And COVID-19, getting the economy back, maybe beyond that, trying to confront the nation's divisions, they think they can get some unity out of a shared commitment to defeating coronavirus once and for all.
ABC News political director Rick Klein. Thanks so much, Rick. And Biden just laid out, as you heard, a bold $1.9 trillion COVID relief plan, with most households getting an additional $1,400, enhanced unemployment benefits of $400 a week, and other measures. We'll see if this can get through Congress. And to help us unpack this plan, we bring in ABC's economic correspondent, Deirdre Bolton. Deirdre, thanks so much for joining us. Walk us through what Biden's plan would mean for the average American and those who are now out of work.
Lindsay, what it really means is it is a necessary lifeline. If we look at those numbers of Americans who are out of work, more than 18 million people are receiving some form of unemployment insurance. Even if you look at today's numbers, the initial weekly jobless claims, it was the worst number that we have seen since August. Two economists told me that the number was absolutely shocking. So there are a lot of people who need help. If the President-elect Biden's plan is passed, there would be support for workers, for businesses, for families. And of course, keep in mind, what we spend collectively is 2/3 of our economic activity. So in addition to people having obvious stresses from not having a job, if you don't have a job, you don't spend. From an economic standpoint, that holds our growth back, Lindsay.
And Deirdre, the U.S. deficit hit a record-breaking $573 billion in the first 3 months of the budget year. That's more than 60% higher than where it was a year ago. And this deficit doesn't even reflect the $900 billion of new stimulus that's already passed. So what does the exploding deficit mean for our economy?
It's not great. It's not fabulous. There's nobody who would tell you that that's different than being somewhat concerning, if you like, meaning we are spending more than we are bringing in. However, the counterpoint to that is, if you look at the last recession, when we're coming out of 2007, 2009, there were some mistakes made where stimulus was pulled back by many people's argument and by many people's observations too early. That made our recovery longer. So I think it's quite clear that it is too soon to take away any kind of stimulus. We heard from the Fed Chairman Jay Powell speaking today in a question and answer session at Princeton and essentially saying it's just too early to take away any kind of stimulus. So most people that I've been speaking with use this analogy. I think it's pretty good, Lindsay. It's to say if you're outside of your home, you see it burning down. You're obviously concerned about that, but you're not going to worry about the water damage that's coming from the firefighters who are trying to put the fire out. That's where we stand right now from a fiscal standpoint, Lindsay.
Good analogy, really puts it in perspective for us. Deirdre Bolton, thanks so much. And let's now bring in ABC News contributor and infectious disease epidemiologist, Dr. John Brownstein. Doctor, exactly a month ago today, the first COVID vaccine was administered. According to the CDC, about 11 million shots have since been distributed. You just heard President-elect Biden say that they have a goal of 100 million shots in their first 100 days. Is it realistically possible to achieve this? And should we be prepared to be in some long lines all around the country like we have seen in places like Florida?
Yeah, thanks, Lindsay. I mean, this Biden plan of 100 million doses 100 days is definitely lofty. It's quite an operational challenge to embark on. It's one of the biggest challenges we've ever seen. It is possible, and if we get it done, then we will get this pandemic under control. The proposal so far is light on specifics, but I think we can get to that 100 million number. That is about improving the existing infrastructure, adding in vaccination sites, really ramping that up, expanding access to the vaccine based on age and pre-existing conditions, adding, improvements to the federal supply chain. Of course, we also need willing arms, right? We need better messaging and communication. So hopefully the funding will go to better education around the vaccine. We can't get into some of the same debacles we've gone into with testing. Clearly, 100 million would get us half the way there to herd immunity, which is about 200 million people. So of course, that's exciting, but the logistical challenges are going to be extreme. Right now, you can't go to the web and fully understand your eligibility or book appointments. Will the Biden plan really get into some of those and help remove these long lines? We don't want these vaccination sites to be also super spreading sites. So a lot of challenges and obstacles, and hopefully some of this effort will help to resolve that.
And when it comes to the vaccine, you've been saying that the problem isn't about manufacturing and shipping, but the need to expand access. So do you feel that the $20 billion proposal towards a national vaccination program just proposed by President-elect Biden will help alleviate some of that? Is that enough?
Yeah, I think at least we're finally putting real money to work to alleviate some of these challenges. As we know, it doesn't help to have vaccines in warehouses. It's all about this last mile problem, right? So how do we improve access, community vaccination centers, improve access for hard to reach populations, expanding access through pharmacies, but also large mass immunization sites, right? Large arenas and fields where we can get to large numbers of people. But of course, the states themselves have to still work out their kinks. It's not just a federal problem. They have to work to identify populations, build out networks of providers. And so there's a lot of effort being placed on the states. And actually what's amazing to see about the Biden plan is there's expansion of public health workforce, 100,000 new individuals being brought in to support states. If that happens, I actually think we can really make a big dent on this pandemic.
Dr. Brownstein, that's what we like to hear, that there could be a dent coming up soon. So we appreciate that optimism and your outlook. Thank you so much. And when we come back, how airlines are tackling the rising disturbances in the sky after that mob riot in Capitol Hill. The former governor pleading not guilty for his role in the Flint water crisis. More on the charges that he faces. But up next, Jacob Blake, shot 7 times by an officer, tells his side of the story. It's an ABC News exclusive. Stay with us.
Admit it, these days, what you need to know seems to change, well, like every day. So what is it that you really need to know, want to know, to help you not just get through your day, but make the most of it? Feel smarter, feel better, feel happier. Well, how about a third hour of Good Morning America in the afternoon? GMA 3, what you need to know. It's all about you. Lunchtime at 1 Eastern, 12 Central and Pacific on ABC. This is going to be so good.
The reality is our country can collapse from within.
You see the white power movement on the march.
Klansmen and neo-Nazis, skinheads. It's meant to incite war.
From the KKK to Oklahoma City to Charlottesville, the new documentary event special.
We just need to start talking about race.
Homegrown Hate, The War Among Us.
This is a real wake-up call.
Streaming now on ABC News Live.
What you're seeing right now, this is part of the eye wall.
This procession of migrants goes back 2 miles.
There is going to be catastrophic damage.
This fire has made a run. You can see those flames shooting up into the sky.
We are on the jam-packed red carpet.
To the right, guys.
So this is the 4th weekend of protest.
Watch ABC News on location for Facebook Watch.
Your mom said, comb your hair. Your dad told you, smarten up. Your dog is judging you right now. And your best friend just called you crazy. We all need someone who'll pull no punches and give it to us straight. Now imagine getting your news like that. No bull, no spin, just give it to me straight. Straightforward news, straight to the heart of the story. ABC News, straightforward.
What's the most innovative daily news podcast out there to listen to every day? Well, the Edward R. Murrow Awards say it's Start Here, the daily news podcast from ABC News. Even the New York Times calls us a top news podcast worth listening to. So if you like getting behind the biggest news stories of the day, inside all the details, the backstory, and what will happen next, then listen to Start Here, the daily news podcast from ABC News. It's like no other news podcast out there. Even the critics agree. Listen free on Apple Podcasts.
Tonight, for the first time since he was shot and partially paralyzed by a police officer in August, Jacob Blake is telling his side of the story. And it comes about 1 week after the announcement that the officers involved will not be charged. Michael Strahan brings us this ABC News exclusive.
You didn't resist.
I resisted to getting beat on. And what I mean by that is not falling, not letting them put their head on my neck. That's all I was thinking, honestly.
Jacob Blake is speaking out for the first time almost 5 months after being shot 7 times by police, leaving him partially paralyzed.
I was counting down my breaths, my blinks. I was like, God, I'm coming. I guess this is it for me.
All unfolding as his sons watched from the back seat of that car.
I was like, he's shooting me. I couldn't believe it, so I kind of sat down in the car trying to do this, put my hands up, because I didn't want him to shoot me in my face or in my head or nothing. He just kept shooting,
So what's going through your mind?
My babies are right here, my babies. So after he stopped shooting me, I said, Daddy, love you, no matter what. I thought it was gonna be the last. I thought it was gonna be the last thing I say to them. Thank God it wasn't.
The incident once again sparking protests across the country, adding fuel to a fire that had been burning all summer since the police killing of George Floyd.
I didn't want to be the next George Floyd. I didn't want to die.
It was August 23rd, and Blake was at the house of LaQuisha Booker, the mother of 3 of his children. They were celebrating their son Israel's 8th birthday when an argument broke out between Booker and a neighbor.
So I just wanted to get them, I wanted to leave. My son is inside. Tears was coming out his eyes. He said, Daddy, you sure it's my birthday? I'm like, yeah, you know. I was like, I'm taking him to the store again, make him forget about all this.
As Blake prepares to leave, Booker calls police.
I'm willing to take that risk. Emergency. Yes, I need an officer. Jacob Blake is here, and he has the keys to a rental that I purchased that I need to take back, and he's not trying to release it.
Police respond to a, quote, family trouble. They're told there's a warrant for Blake on domestic violence offenses and sexual assault. What are you doing when they show up?
At that time, I'm walking out. I hadn't done anything, so I didn't feel like they were there for me.
Blake proceeds to put one of his sons in the car, and that's when he says he felt someone grab his arm.
I took my arm away in a human reaction. After I did that, I realized that it was the police, and I was like, uh-oh, because when I did that, he slammed me up against the truck.
Before the cop grabbed you, did they say anything to you?
No, not at all.
According to the Wisconsin Criminal Investigation Report, Officer Shesky recalled saying, quote, "Let's talk about this." He said Blake put his child in the car and turned to face him. Shesky said he then grabbed Blake's arm to put him under arrest and told Blake that he had a warrant. They didn't say why they were there?
They didn't say anything to me.
Did they tell you that they had a warrant for your arrest?
No.
Some sort of struggle follows. Police believe Blake is reaching for a weapon more than once. Blake denies this. Police deploy a taser multiple times. Blake pulls the taser prongs out of his skin. Officer Shesky and Blake end up in a physical altercation on the ground. We see you walk away from the officers after they try to grab you.
I'm rattled. You know, I realized I had dropped my knife. I had a little pocket knife. So I picked it up after I got off of him because they tased me and I fell on top of him.
With an open knife in hand that Blake says fell out of his pocket, he walks around the front of the vehicle towards the driver's side door. What are you thinking at that point?
I'm not really worried. I'm walking away from them, so it's not like they're gonna shoot me. I shouldn't have picked it up, only considering what was going on. At that time, I wasn't thinking clearly.
You were thinking once you get the knife into the car, you were going to just say,
throw myself to the ground and, you know, put my arms behind my back. Because if they did it there and they killed me there, everybody would see it.
According to the Wisconsin Criminal Investigative Report, Officer Shesky says that Blake drove the knife towards Shesky's body. Blake denies this. Blake opens the car door, and at that moment, Officer Shesky grabs the back of Blake's shirt and starts shooting. You said that we can just look at the video. The video tells everything. There are going to be a lot of people who look at the video and say, in the video, you're walking away from the police. So why didn't he just stop and do what the police are asking him to do?
I couldn't hear that. All I heard was screaming, screaming. My ears was ringing, so it was all muffled.
If the police were fighting me, if they were tasing me, I would stop walking away from them, and they would have my attention.
I mean, I had not left or tried to run at that point. That when they tased me, I had my hands up.
Officer Shesky's attorney says Blake was given every opportunity to comply, but he chose not to, and insists that, quote, the officers acted according to their training. According to records released in the Wisconsin Criminal Investigation Report, in the past, Blake has been arrested for attempting to flee police and for resisting arrest. These charges were dropped. There are critics who are going to say, well, he's had run-in with the law in the past. He doesn't deserve any sympathy.
If you're a black person in America and you're not perfect, then they say, oh, it was justified. It's like our children have to be angels.
And we know your kids who were in the car. Have you had any conversations with them about this since it all happened?
I've explained to him and broke it down to him, like, Daddy can die, but for some reason I didn't that day.
Powerful story there. Still ahead here on Prime, the quick-thinking waitress who helped rescue an abused child. The forgotten password that could cost one man hundreds of millions of dollars. Yes, you heard that right. And we're taking a look at the looming Senate impeachment trial by the numbers. But first, our tweet of the day. Lady Gaga tells her fans she will sing the national anthem during Biden's inauguration.
This is what being live is all about. This is ABC News Live, the 24/7 streaming news source from ABC News. Wow. Breaking news, live events as they happen, streaming live, non-stop, straight to you. Original, on the edge, breakthrough storytelling from ABC News, National Geographic, ESPN, all designed differently for you to stream straight to any screen whenever you want, free. And imagine the most celebrated, epic live events and moments, all playing out right before your eyes.
See those flames behind me?
And go deeper inside the groundbreaking exclusives from the campaign trail only ABC News gets. Watch ABC News Live right now and anytime. Streaming on Roku, Hulu, Facebook, and abcnews.com.
ABC News Live, streaming everywhere, right to you.
ABC News Live.
The Americans here on the ground and the Iraqis, 18,000 tons. batatas. Ismail? David.
For ground zero from Hurricane Michael.
You can see just home after home. David, nice to meet you. This was your view.
My favorite view.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes, mornings may look different these days, but where you start your day,
where you spend your mornings, where you get connected to everything that's happening.
And face it, there's a whole lot happening in our world these days.
where you get all the breaking new information of the day to help you navigate through these times.
That's why we're here.
Good morning, sunshine.
And making sure you start your day off with a smile and some sunshine.
Good morning, America.
Good morning, America.
Good morning, America. Oh, how I love saying that.
Wake me up.
The world may feel out of your control, but your happiness doesn't have to be. Learn the secrets to happiness. Listen to the 10% Happier podcast, free on Apple Podcasts.
ABC News honored winner for the second straight year with the Edward R. Murrow Award for Overall Excellence in Television. ABC News, America's #1 news source.
This is GMA3, what you need to know. GMA3.
A third hour of Good Morning America in the afternoon.
It's all about you. Lunchtime on ABC.
Welcome back, everyone. Now that President Trump's been impeached for a second time, we take a look by the numbers at where Republican lawmakers now stand on conviction and how loyal they've been in the past. 4 GOP senators have suggested that they support removing Trump from office. Senators Pat Toomey, Ben Sasse, Lisa Murkowski, and Mitt Romney, while 11 Republican senators suggested they'll vote no or that they're leaning toward no. 7 have given neutral responses or said no comment. Among them, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, who said he hasn't made a final decision and intends to listen to legal arguments. McConnell rarely rebukes the president and on policy has voted with him 91% of the time. Yesterday, 197 House Republicans voted not to impeach the president this week, while 10 voted in favor. And finally, just 15% of Republican voters support Trump's removal, according to a new polling average by 538. Still, lots to get to here on Prime tonight. The pastor shot and killed by police and the anger that's growing tonight. Plastic container use has skyrocketed with so many indoor dining options shut down. So what can we do to help the environment yet still order out? Ginger Z has another It's Not Too Late. But first, a look at our top trending stories on abcnews.com.
The reality is our country can collapse from within.
You see the white power movement on the march. Klansmen and neo-Nazis, skinheads, it's meant to incite war.
From the KKK to Oklahoma City to Charlottesville, the new documentary event special.
We just need to start talking about race.
Homegrown hate, the war among us.
This is a real wake-up call.
Streaming now on ABC News Live.
Now, when it matters most, the straightforward facts. ABC News is America's #1 news. #1 in the morning, #1 in the evening, with America's most watched newscast. #1 in late night versus the competition. The #1 news magazine on Friday nights. #1 in politics across this historic election versus the competition. The #1 daytime talk show. And #1 in streaming news. ABC News is America's #1 news.
What's the most innovative daily news podcast out there to listen to every day? Well, the Edward R. Murrow Awards say it's Start Here, the daily news podcast from ABC News. Even the New York Times calls us a top news podcast worth listening to. So if you like getting behind the biggest news stories of the day, inside all the details, the backstory, and what will happen next, then listen to Start Here, the daily news podcast from ABC News. It's like no other news podcast out there. Even the critics agree. Listen free on Apple Podcasts.
Yes, mornings may look different these days, but where you start your day,
where you spend your mornings, where you get connected to everything that's happening.
And face it, there's a whole lot happening in our world these days.
where you get all the breaking new information of the day to help you navigate through these times.
That's why we're here.
Good morning, sunshine.
And making sure you start your day off with a smile and some sunshine.
Good morning, America.
Good morning, America.
Good morning, America. Oh, how I love saying that.
Wake me up.
The
most powerful stories of our time, anytime. Nightline.
Friday nights, 9/8 Central. True crime, cinematic, real-life drama, stunning, the unthinkable. Follow the clues. The Hunt. True crime. 2020. Friday nights, 9/8 Central on ABC.
21,000 National Guard members are heading to Washington, D.C. to help with security surrounding next week's inauguration of President-elect Joe Biden. Federal authorities warning all 50 states to be on heightened alert ahead of Inauguration Day.
We are seeing an extensive amount of concerning online chatter.
Several major airlines now won't allow travelers flying to D.C. airports ahead of inauguration to check firearms, and Airbnb canceling reservations in the city for next week.
And literally thousands and thousands of men and women in uniform that are going to make it possible for us to have a safe inauguration.
Another distressing video showing the final moments of an unarmed black man shot by police, this time in KLEIN, Texas.
They noticed their loved one deteriorating, undergoing some sort of psychosis, it appeared. They spoke with medical professionals.
Lawyer Lee Merritt says family for 52-year-old Patrick Warren Sr. called police in an effort to calm him. A mental health deputy wasn't available.
Based on the video, Merritt says the officer had an aggressive stance after engaging with Warren Sr.
Then he leaves and takes a tactical position as if he's preparing to engage this man in his home.
When looking at the video, you can see Warren Sr.'s arms in the air, taking steps forward. The officer asking to see his hands and saying, "Get down on the ground," as the family says, "Don't shoot him." You can hear Warren Sr. being tased. Not long after.
Hey, Dad, sit down! Sit down! Sit down! Sit down! Please!
The first of at least 3 gunshots are fired. A family member screaming.
No! No, I told you don't use a gun!
The family is demanding the immediate firing and arrest of the officer responsible for Warren's death.
Quick-thinking waitress hailed as a hero today for saving a little boy from allegedly abusive parents. Flavane Carvalho told police in Orlando she knew something was wrong. 11-year-old boy sitting with a man and woman at one of her tables was forbidden from ordering anything to eat. Then she noticed bruises on his arms and face, so she came up with a plan. She wrote a message on a paper and held it up for the boy to read from a place where only he could see it.
Thank God he was sitting in the only chair. He could see me, but the parents don't.
Well, it took 2 tries before the boy signaled yes. The waitress then called 911. Police arrested the boy's mother and stepfather.
Legendary illusionist Siegfried Fischbacher, the surviving member of the duo Siegfried and Roy, has died. He was 81. Siegfried's death comes just 8 months after his partner, Roy Horn, died of complications from COVID-19. Siegfried and Roy first performed together in 1957. They continued their shows until 2003, when Roy was injured by one of their famous white tigers.
Well, a virtual nightmare for a man with $250 million in Bitcoin. Yes, billion. He's forgotten his password. Stephen Thomas says he's been locked out of his account since 2012. Back then, it wasn't as much of a fortune because each of his 7,000 coins was worth about $10 in cash. Now, the going rate, you know how much it is? It's 37 grand.
What?
The man has the password stored on an old hard drive, but he lost the password to that too, and has only 2 more tries before he gets locked out.
A lot of people are offering various solutions, everything from the silly to for example, one person suggested, have you tried the word password?
Well, according to the New York Times, the problem is rather common with about $140 billion now inaccessible in digital wallets.
Welcome back. One place where the tense mood in public right now is flying high. Airplanes, anger over mask mandates, and defiance among some Trump supporters as a number of airlines step in and prevent some passengers from flying if they took part in the attack on the Capitol. Our Gio Benitez has that story.
Tonight, as videos emerge of unruly passengers flying to and from D.C. last week, the FAA's chief telling us the agency will have a zero-tolerance policy for disruptions with big fines and possible jail time.
$35,000 and up to
20 years if it's referred for criminal measures. For the time being, up until March 30th, we are going to go straight to enforcement.
The list of banned passengers growing in the wake of those Capitol Hill riots. United banning 60 people for mask violations last week alone, a number far higher than any other week. Alaska Airlines banning 14 on a single flight. Applause Sunday after law enforcement removed this passenger from the plane when they landed in Washington, D.C. American Airlines saying the woman would not comply with mask policies, yelling, passengers say, about tyranny.
If we don't stand up, it's only going to get worse.
And on this flight from D.C. to Phoenix Friday, 2 days after the riot,
USA!
The American Airlines pilot threatening to land the plane mid-flight to dump people off if passengers didn't listen to crew member instructions, especially about masks.
This kind of behavior is not acceptable. And certainly the events at the Capitol last week were appalling to everyone. And when these events happen on airplanes and they are reported to us, then we will take the appropriate action to make sure that the aviation system remains safe.
And the concerns aren't just in the air. Airlines have beefed up security at D.C. area airports.
You traitor! You traitor!
This moment as Senator Lindsey Graham walked through Reagan National Airport in D.C. Some passengers have already been banned for harassing other lawmakers. In all, U.S. Airlines banning nearly 3,000 passengers. Gio Benitez, ABC News, New York.
2,000 members of the Virginia National Guard are being deployed to Washington to help protect the U.S. Capitol, and members of Virginia law enforcement were some of the first to help respond to last week's attack. We are joined now by Virginia Governor Ralph Northam. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, Governor. Now, the Washington Post reported that Speaker Pelosi called you as this Capitol siege was happening, saying, quote, "There's glass being broken around me. We're just very, very concerned right now." Take us inside that moment and how you responded.
Well, thanks for having me on today. And, you know, a week ago, we all witnessed the armed insurrection of our U.S. Capitol. I was actually given a press conference dealing with COVID and how we were going to distribute our vaccinations, and our press secretary notified me that the U.S. Capitol had been breached. We brought the press conference to an end. I started receiving calls and talking with various people in Washington, to include the mayor of the District of Columbia and the Speaker of the House. And I got on the phone with Speaker Pelosi, and she had been taken to an area that was secure, but said that there was glass breaking around her. There had been gunfire, and just said, please send help as quickly as you can. So we deployed about 200 of our state police, and they were on the ground very soon thereafter. And then we also deployed our National Guard, and now have over 2,000 of our guardsmen and women on the premise of the U.S. Capitol.
Now, we saw that troubling intel from the FBI office in Norfolk that warned that rioters discussing plans online ahead of last week's attack were, quote, ready for war. And we're seeing potential threats now facing state capitals in the coming days as well. What resources are you marshaling to track and prevent threats from white supremacists and other groups that may come from Virginia to D.C. or to target your capital in Richmond?
Well, unfortunately, we have experience here in Virginia. We had the riots in Charlottesville back in August of 2017, and then we had a lot of armed protesters in January. And so we have some experience. We're obviously working with our local law enforcement, our state police. We have Capitol Police here, and we also have the National Guard available. So we have prepared. Unfortunately, fences are up around our state's Capitol. The bottom floor, the windows have been boarded up. It's a unfortunate situation, but we've made it known to these individuals that if they come here looking for trouble, that we're ready, and the outcome is not going to be good for them.
And as you just mentioned, Virginia, of course, no stranger to the threat of violent protests from white supremacist groups, as we witnessed in Charlottesville in 2017. And you were also the potential target of militia groups who discussed kidnapping you last year. What lessons do you take away from those moments that could help the country at this point deal with the threat going forward?
Well, the first lesson is that words have meaning, and our leaders need to be very careful with how they message to those that support them. And, you know, over the past few years, Lindsay, we have a president that has really created a tinderbox with the lies that he has been telling recently after November the 3rd, saying that the election was stolen. And these individuals that support him hear this over and over again. And then on Wednesday, a week ago, he literally threw a flame on that tinderbox, and the rest is history. So we take these threats very, very seriously. Our legislature is here in town now doing the work of the people, and so we're going to do everything that we can to keep Virginia safe, to keep our capital safe, and also to assure that there's a peaceful transition of power in Washington. We hope that things calm down. Every day that this president is in office is one day too many. The sooner that he can leave Washington, the better for all of us.
And lastly, turning to the pandemic, we saw you at a mass vaccination for teachers in Virginia earlier this week, but your state has had a rather sluggish rollout so far, with CDC data showing Virginia at the back of the pack, administering just 26% of the doses the Commonwealth has received so far. So what would you say that the Biden administration can do to help states speed up distribution, and what can Virginia do better as well?
Well, it's going to be a breath of fresh air to have a partner in Washington that will work with the states and the localities. You know, we have only about, 10, 12 other states that have given more vaccinations than Virginia has. Those states, most of them are larger than Virginia, but there is no question that we can do it more rapidly. And so about a week ago, I made an announcement that, one, we're going to have a goal, and that is to go to 25,000 as quickly as we can a day, and then 50,000 shots a day. We brought on what I call a field general, Dr. Danny Avula, who has a lot of experience logistically in vaccinations. And so he's on the ground and working hard. The National Guard obviously will be part of this program moving forward. And then I've basically told the clinics and the hospitals and the health departments, if you're not using the doses that we give you, you're going to lose it. And so all of that together, I think provided some urgency for the vaccination program in Virginia. And we've moved from 1A to 1B. We've lowered the age of individuals to 65. So as long as we can get the supply that we need in Virginia, we're ready to distribute this vaccination, and I think our numbers will continue to rise on a daily basis till we get to our goal of 50,000 shots a day.
Governor Northam, we thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. Stay safe.
You too. Nearly 7 years after the contamination of Flint's drinking water, tonight the former Michigan governor and 8 other officials are facing charges. Alex Perez has more.
Tonight, the former governor of Michigan, Rick Snyder, charged in connection with the Flint water crisis.
Any comment on the charges, Governor Snyder?
Years after toxic levels of lead were discovered in the city's water and an outbreak of Legionnaire's disease killed at least 12.
People of the state of Michigan versus Richard Dale Snyder.
Prosecutors charging Snyder with 2 misdemeanor counts of willful neglect of duty. He's pleaded not guilty. 8 other state officials also facing charges, including 2 who are facing 9 counts each of involuntary manslaughter.
This case is about justice, truth, accountability, poisoned children, lost lives.
The horrifying ordeal unfolding in this mostly black city of about 100,000 people when, to save money, the state switched the city's water supply to come from the Flint River. Leanne Walters was one of the first residents to ring the alarm.
There are huge victories that have accomplished, but there's still a lot of work that needs to be done.
Nearly 7 years later, even though officials now say the tap is safe, residents like Shirley Drake still rely on bottled water.
I don't trust the water in the pipes.
Jim Ananek, a Michigan state senator, doesn't like his 5-year-old son drinking the water.
Especially in younger people, we're going to have to deal with this for a generation. Some people I don't think will ever feel there's justice, right? But I think criminal convictions of folks will be a start.
And Lindsay, that really is one of the big problems for people who live in Flint, the confidence. They simply do not trust the water coming out of the tap there. Now, we should mention that the governor and the others charged have all posted bail and been released. Lindsay?
Alex, thanks so much. And we are now learning that 2020 was the second hottest year ever recorded. The average temperature was 1.76 degrees warmer than average. Here in the northern hemisphere, we had the warmest year ever. The hottest year ever recorded remains 2016. The world's 7 warmest years have all occurred since 2014. COVID-19 has forced restaurants across the country to shutter their doors, pivoting many to takeout-only options. But with this, single-use plastic containers have skyrocketed. In this week's It's Not Too Late, our Ginger Z takes a look at how companies are stepping up to tackle this crisis, one reusable container at a time.
Hi, I'm Ginger Z, and it's not too late. Happy New Year! I know a lot of people thinking about New Year, new you. Maybe you want to do meditation or fitness. Diet certainly makes it into a lot of the resolutions. But how about not just thinking about the food that you eat, but what the food comes in? We all know we've been ordering more takeout, and for restaurants, takeout has been a savior during the pandemic. However, it's been really bad for the environment. One of the things that has kept restaurants alive in the pandemic has been takeout, but it's also created an influx of waste. In the U.S., food and its packaging make up 45% of landfills. In India, 235 million food containers were tossed out in 2018 alone. And in Europe, more than 2 billion food product packages are put in the trash every year. The last thing I wanted to do was vilify restaurants for hurting the planet when they're just trying to survive during the pandemic. But we found that there's a solution where they can save both their profits and the planet at the same time. It's already happening in San Francisco, Washington, D.C., and New York. A California nonprofit called Rethink Disposables has worked with hundreds of restaurants and even a school district to get rid of single-use food container waste.
So we found that, like, on average, a restaurant, by switching to reusables, they will prevent 110,000 pieces of disposable items from entering the waste stream or even being used at all. And this is every single year. Mm-hmm. And the range of savings for a small business is between $3,000 and $21,000 of annual net cost savings per year.
We thought we'd show you how one works. This one is called Deliver Zero. It's simple. Just like Uber Eats or Grubhub, seamless, you enter your zip code and see who delivers. Then just order the food. Thank you so much. Thank you. Here's the big difference. Your food comes in these heavy-duty containers. And after you eat it, when you're through with your food, don't throw it away. Take the containers, give them back to the next delivery guy, or you can return them to any restaurant that partakes in Deliver Zero. I got kebabs, but I'm going to replace these at a Thai place. The restaurant deeply sanitizes them, and the next Deliver Zero order goes out in that same container. I mean, the number of single-use takeout products has skyrocketed.
Yeah. There are about 414 million pounds of restaurant disposables that New York City goes through every year. I mean, that's everything from little soy sauce packets to forks and knives to takeout containers. And there are probably 1 billion takeout containers that go in the garbage in New York City every year.
And then at the end of it, I like the savings for the restaurant.
Yeah.
That the packaging costs them money.
That's right. I mean, you know, a cheap takeout container could be maybe 20 cents. I have a restaurant that pays 85 cents for a single-use container, which is just crazy. So every time they're using one of these, they're saving money that they would otherwise have to spend on buying a single-use container that they use for one order and then it gets thrown away.
Jonathan Bayer owns Sky Ice. It's a Thai and specialty ice cream shop in Brooklyn. Both his locations have been part of Deliver Zero for just over a year.
And then when Adam walked through our doors a year and a half ago, I was like, my gosh, the solution is here.
Yes.
It's such a great product, you know, completely sustainable, and it's really starting to catch on.
Whether you're normally takeout or you've had to go to a lot more takeout, it can actually help both profit and planet.
Absolutely. So we're spending less on purchasing the to-go containers, right, and using more of the reusable. So it's a win-win in that way, and then of course less waste.
The first thing that when I talked about it, people were like, how do they clean up?
The cleanup's really easy. I mean, just like you would clean your dish at home. It goes through a severe sanitizing, right? You know, everything is washed thoroughly. Some people even wash before they return their containers. So then it's being washed twice. But we have not had an issue, and that does not seem to be a hurdle.
Deliver Zero is only in Brooklyn and in Manhattan for now. Plans to open in Amsterdam soon and other places, hopefully, but there are other services. And you can just ask your delivery service or your takeout restaurant to not include all the waste, or at least the extra stuff. That way you can sit back, enjoy the convenience, and know that it's not too late.
Has us all thinking green. Our thanks to Ginger for that. And before we go tonight, the image of the day. A message from above, from the birds in the shape of a heart. This starling mermation, as it's called, may be trying to tell us all something. Thanks so much for watching this extended version of Prime. That's our show for now. Be sure to stay tuned to ABC News Live for more context and analysis of the day's top stories. I'm Lindsay Davis. Thanks so much for streaming with us, and good night.